Let me ask you something nobody ever dares to ask out loud. What if the thing that's killing you isn't stress, isn't failure, isn't heartbreak, isn't the job loss or the breakup or the bankruptcy? What if the thing that's slowly, quietly, methodically dismantling every single version of who you could become is comfort? Not pain, comfort. Not struggle, ease. Not the darkness, the warm, dim light of good enough. Because here's the terrifying reality nobody puts on a poster, nobody tattoos on their wrist, nobody builds an Instagram aesthetic around. The most dangerous place you will ever live is a life that doesn't hurt enough to leave. Think about that. Really think about it. Not a bad life, not an abusive situation, not a burning building. A comfortable life, a predictable life, a life where you wake up, go through the motions, come home, scroll your phone, fall asleep, and do it again tomorrow. A life that isn't destroying you visibly, so you never feel the urgency to escape. That's the average trap. And you're in it right now. I know you are, because you're watching a video called Comfort is Slowly Killing You, and something in your chest said, yeah, that's me. Something in you recognized the cage before you even saw the bars. We are 14 days into this journey together. Day 1, we talked about waking up. Day 7, we talked about pain being a teacher. But today, day 14, we go somewhere different. We go somewhere most motivational content is afraid to go. We're going to dissect comfort, not demonize it cheaply, not just slap a quote on it and move on. We are going to understand biologically, psychologically, spiritually, and practically why the most comfortable version of your life is also the most dangerous. Because understanding the trap is the only way to escape it. So buckle in. This is not a feel-good video. This is a feel-everything video. By the time we're done, all 10 parts, you will never look at comfort the same way again. Let's start at the beginning. The biology of comfort. Your brain, this 3-pound machine sitting behind your eyes, evolved over hundreds of thousands of years with one primary goal: keep you alive. Not happy, not fulfilled, not legendary, alive. And to keep you alive, your brain developed a system called the path of least resistance. It's not laziness, it's not weakness, it's survival architecture. Your brain is literally wired to conserve energy, avoid uncertainty, and return to familiar patterns. Because in the ancient world, familiar meant safe. Unfamiliar meant predators, meant starvation, meant death. But here's where it gets dark for modern humans. We no longer live in that world. The lion is gone, the famine is gone, but the brain? The brain hasn't gotten the memo. Your brain still treats uncertainty like a predator, still treats the unfamiliar like a threat, still releases stress hormones when you try to do something new, uncomfortable, or risky, even if that risk is just starting a business, asking for a raise, moving to a new city, saying yes to something terrifying and wonderful. Your brain feels all of that as danger, and so it does what it was built to do. It pulls you back. Back to the couch, back to the routine, back to the known, back to comfort. This is called homeostasis, your brain's obsessive drive to maintain equilibrium, and it is ruthless. It doesn't care about your dreams. It doesn't care about your potential. It cares about one thing: return to baseline. And baseline, for most people in 21st century America, is comfortable enough to stop trying. That's the trap. Your own biology is the jailer. Now, here's something that nobody talks about, something clinical, something real. Comfort functions like an anesthetic. You know what an anesthetic does, right? It doesn't kill you, it doesn't heal you, it just numbs you. It removes the sensation of pain so you can't feel what's happening to you. It's useful in surgery, it's catastrophic in life. Because when you can't feel the pain of staying stuck, when the comfort of routine numbs the ache of unlived potential, you stop moving, you stop fighting, you stop reaching. The person in actual agony, the one who's broken, desperate, at rock bottom with nothing left to lose, that person has the most powerful fuel on earth. They have pain, pain that screams, pain that demands action. But the comfortable person, The person who's doing okay, who has enough, who isn't suffering but isn't soaring either. They have a slow drip of anesthetic, day after day, year after year. And one morning, maybe at 40, maybe at 50, maybe on a Tuesday in November when the light hits just right, they wake up and realize they can't feel anything anymore. The dreams they had at 20 feel like someone else's memories. The version of themselves they imagined becoming feels like a character from a book they never finished reading. And the worst part, there was no dramatic moment, no clear catalyst, no villain to blame. Just comfort. Just years and years of choosing the easier thing over the right thing. That is the average trap at its most brutal. So, before we go further, I need you to do one thing, just one. Sit in the silence for 30 seconds after this part ends. No phone, no scroll, no distraction. Just ask yourself, am I in pain enough to change, or am I comfortable enough to stay? And whatever the answer is, be honest, because the truth, even if it's terrifying, is the only thing that can set you free. Part 2 is coming, and it's going to go deeper.
Let me tell you about the most invisible prison in the world. It has no walls, no guards, no locks on the door. You can walk out at any time, theoretically. But almost nobody does, because this prison, unlike the ones made of stone and steel, is built out of something far more powerful than concrete. It's built out of who you think you are, your identity, the story you've told yourself and let others tell about you for so long that you've stopped questioning whether it's true, whether it was ever true, whether it has to keep being true. I'm not a morning person. I'm not good with money. I'm not the kind of person who does big things. I'm just average. Say something enough times and your brain converts it from an opinion into a fact, from a story into a sentence. Not a prison sentence with a release date, a grammatical sentence, a statement of being. I am average. And the moment you believe that, the moment that phrase moves from something you say to something you are, your brain immediately begins confirming it. Psychologists call this the confirmation bias. Your mind, desperately trying to stay consistent with its own narrative, starts filtering reality to match the story. You stop noticing opportunities because people like me don't get those. You stop applying for positions because I'm not qualified enough. You stop dreaming openly because dreaming is for people with advantages I don't have. The identity becomes the cage, and the cage becomes the comfort. Now, here's where it gets even more insidious, because your identity isn't just internal, it gets confirmed externally too. The people around you, your family, your friends, your coworkers, they have a version of you in their heads, a version they've constructed over years of observation. And that version, it's almost always a slightly outdated model. It's you from 2 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago. And unconsciously, not maliciously, but powerfully, they reinforce that version every single day. Oh, you know how he is. He talks big but never follows through. She's smart, but she'll never leave that job. That's just who they are. And you hear it over and over, not always in words, sometimes just in expressions, in the slight eyebrow raise when you mention a new ambition, in the subtle smirk when you say, "I'm thinking about starting something," in the "oh wow, that's interesting" tone that translates to "I give this 3 weeks." And slowly, slowly, you start to perform the version of yourself that the room expects. Because humans are social creatures. We are wired for belonging, for acceptance, for tribal harmony. And the path of least social resistance is to be exactly who everyone already believes you are. Average, safe, predictable, comfortable. That is the identity prison. and the bars are made of other people's expectations accepted as your own truth. This connects to something even bigger that we need to talk about. The average trap doesn't just affect individuals, it operates in groups. Look around at the 5 people you spend the most time with. I'm not asking you to judge them or abandon them. I'm asking you to observe something. What is the average level of ambition in that group? What is the average level of discipline? What is the average level of financial literacy, physical health, emotional growth? Because here's what the research shows, and not motivational poster research, actual sociological and psychological data. You will almost inevitably drift toward the average of your closest circle. Not because you're weak, but because humans unconsciously calibrate to their environment. We absorb the standards around us, the way we absorb language, without even realizing it's happening. If everyone around you thinks working out 3 times a week is impressive, you'll think that's a high bar. If everyone around you is in mediocre relationships, you'll unconsciously accept less in your own. If everyone around you treats just getting by as success, that becomes your internal benchmark for success. The average of the room becomes the ceiling of your ambition. And if the room is comfortable, if the tribe is safe and settled and satisfied with okay, you will never feel the discomfort required to become something more. So how do you escape a prison that you can't see? Step 1. Name it. Call the story out loud. Say it to yourself. I have been telling myself that I'm the kind of person who fill in the blank. Naming the narrative is the first act of rebellion against it. Step 2. Interrogate it. Ask the question that your comfortable mind never wants to ask. Who told me this? When did I first decide this was true? Is this a fact about my nature, or is it a conclusion I drew from limited data points in a specific period of my life? Most of the limiting beliefs you carry, the ones that keep you average, aren't conclusions from a full life of evidence. They're conclusions from a few painful moments you were too young to contextualize. A teacher who said you weren't smart, a parent who dismissed your ambition, a failure you experienced before you had the tools to handle it. You drew a permanent conclusion from a temporary circumstance, and then you built a comfortable life inside that conclusion. Step 3. Act against the story. Not just think against it, act. Because identity doesn't change through reflection alone. Identity changes through behavior. You can't think your way into being a different person. You have to do your way into it, one small, uncomfortable act at a time. Show up to the gym when you don't feel like it, and you've challenged the identity that says you're undisciplined. Make the call you've been avoiding, and you've challenged the identity that says you're a procrastinator. Share your idea publicly, and you've challenged the identity that says you're not brave enough. Each action is a vote for a new story. Cast enough votes, and the story changes. The identity prison is real, but it is not permanent. It is not physical. It has no lock that requires a key. It requires only a decision to stop performing the comfortable version of yourself that the room expects and start inhabiting the uncomfortable version that your future demands. That version is waiting. It has always been waiting. Part 3 is where we go to war with the most seductive form of the average trap, the one that looks like success.
There are 2 kinds of traps. The first kind is obvious. It's ugly. It's painful. It looks like rock bottom. The addiction, the bankruptcy, the broken marriage, the rock bottom moment where everything falls apart, and there's no denying that something has to change. These traps are brutal, but in their brutality, they're honest. You know you're in them, and that knowledge, that undeniable, impossible to ignore knowledge, becomes the rocket fuel that launches you out. The second kind of trap is different. The second kind is beautiful. It's the good job that pays well but kills your soul, the comfortable relationship that's safe but empty, the city you stayed in because it was familiar, the career path you followed because it made sense on paper, the version of making it that looked exactly like the version your parents told you to want. The golden cage. This is the most dangerous trap of all, because when the cage is gilded, when the prison has granite countertops and a 401k and a decent vacation package, you can convince yourself for decades that you're free. I want to say something that might make you uncomfortable, not to tear down anything, but to illuminate something important. The traditional American dream, the house, the car, the stable job, the 2 kids, the retirement at 65, was never designed to produce extraordinary human beings. It was designed to produce functional, predictable, consumable workers and citizens, not as a conspiracy, but as a cultural system, an operating system for a society that needed stability and reliability and productivity on a massive scale. And that system worked. It built a nation, but it also built a nation of people who learned, generation by generation, to define their ceiling by what the system told them was success. Get the degree, get the job, get the house, get the promotion, stay in your lane, don't rock the boat, be grateful for what you have. Gratitude is beautiful, gratitude is essential, but gratitude weaponized against ambition, gratitude used as a reason to stop growing, is just another form of the anesthetic we talked about in part 1. You can be deeply grateful and still know you're meant for more. You can appreciate what you have and still know that staying here would be a betrayal of everything you could become. Gratitude and ambition are not enemies, they're partners, and anyone who tries to use your gratitude as a leash, even yourself, is operating inside the average trap. Here's something practical that keeps people in the golden cage long after they've realized they want out. Lifestyle inflation. The moment most people start earning more, they start spending more, not maliciously, not stupidly, just naturally. The better apartment, the nicer car, the restaurants instead of cooking, the trips, the clothes, the subscriptions, and with every upgrade in lifestyle, the cost of escape goes up. You can't leave the job you hate because now you need the salary to sustain the life you've built to distract yourself from the job you hate. Read that again. You built the lifestyle to make the job bearable, and then the lifestyle requires the job, and now you're locked in. Not by chains, by Pelotons and lease payments, and the very real, very human need to feel like you're living well. This is the golden cage made financial, and it is breathtakingly effective at keeping extraordinary people trapped in ordinary lives. The practical escape isn't dramatic. It's boring. It's disciplined. It's this. Before you inflate your lifestyle to match your income, pause. Ask, does this upgrade me more freedom or less? Does this purchase expand my options in 5 years or narrow them? Does this make me more comfortable, or does it make me more capable of becoming uncomfortable when the time comes? Every dollar of lifestyle inflation is a dollar of leverage you've traded away. Every financial obligation is a weight around the ankle of your ambition. The people who escape the golden cage aren't always the ones who earn the most. They're the ones who kept their cost of living low enough that the cage door was never fully locked. Beyond the practical, there's something else the golden cage does, something that doesn't show up on a spreadsheet. It costs you your sense of aliveness. There is a specific kind of deadness that comes from living a life that is fine. Not terrible, not wonderful, just fine. Manageable, adequate, tolerable. The Japanese have a word ikigai that roughly translates to reason for being, the thing that makes you jump out of bed in the morning. The intersection of what you love, what you're good at, what the world needs, and what you can be paid for. Most people in golden cages have abandoned the search for their ikigai, not because they don't want it, but because the cage is comfortable enough that the search feels unnecessary. The ache of an unlived purpose gets drowned out by Netflix and happy hour and weekend plans. But the ache doesn't go away. It just gets quieter, more familiar, more comfortable to ignore, until one day it erupts. Midlife crisis? Depression with no clear cause? The inexplicable anxiety that strikes at 2 a.m. when you should be content? The tears you can't explain to your partner? That's the unlived self, knocking, having been patient for years, done being ignored. The golden cage is real, and it is seductive, and there is no shame in having been in it. Most of the most extraordinary people who ever lived spent years there first. But recognition is the key. The moment you can name it, the moment you look at your comfortable, adequate, gilded life and say, this is not what I was built for, the door unlocks. Not swings open, unlocks. You still have to push it. Part 4 is about what's waiting on the other side.
I want to tell you about a study. Not a motivational parable, not an anecdote dressed up as research, an actual longitudinal study done by palliative care nurses, where they asked dying patients in the final weeks of their lives about their greatest regrets. The number one answer across demographics, across cultures, across ages and backgrounds and life circumstances was not what you might expect. It wasn't, I wish I'd worked less. It wasn't, I wish I'd loved more. It wasn't even, I wish I'd been kinder. The number one regret, spoken by more dying people than any other, was this: I wish I'd have the courage to live a life true to myself and not the life others expected of me. Not the life I was too afraid to live. Not the life I lacked talent for. Not the life circumstances prevented. The life I chose comfort over. That's the ghost of the unlived life. And it haunts people not at the end. It haunts them in the middle. It haunts them at 35 and 42 and 28 and 51. It haunts them on Sunday afternoons when the week hasn't started yet and the obligations haven't kicked in yet. And for a few quiet hours, they're forced to sit with themselves and ask, is this it? Is this all there is? The parallel life. Here's a concept I want you to sit with. The parallel life. The parallel life is the version of your existence that's running simultaneously, not in another dimension, not in a science fiction sense, but in the realm of what could have been, what could still be, what your untapped potential is slowly, quietly generating as possibility, waiting for permission to become reality. Every person carries a parallel life. The book you haven't written, the business you haven't started, the conversation you haven't had, the city you haven't moved to, the version of yourself that would have emerged if you'd chosen discomfort over comfort at that critical juncture 3 years ago. The tragedy isn't that the parallel life doesn't exist. The tragedy is that for most people, it runs its entire course without ever being lived. The parallel self gets older alongside you, gets quieter as the years pass, gets dimmer as the comfort deepens. And then somewhere around the midpoint of your life, you catch a glimpse of it in someone else's story, in a documentary, in a conversation, in a rare, honest moment of self-reflection, and you feel something that has no precise name in English. German has a word, Torschlusspanik, literally gate-closing panic. The fear that time is running out, that the doors are closing, that the version of you that could have been extraordinary is aging out of possibility. That feeling is the ghost. And the ghost is not a haunting, it's an invitation. Here is something that will reframe your entire relationship with regret, if you let it. Regret is not a punishment. Regret is a compass. When you feel the sting of, I should have done that, that sting is information. It is your deepest self pointing at the direction of your growth. It is the arrow on the map saying, here is where you were supposed to go. Here is what mattered. Here is what was real. The question is not, how do I stop feeling regret? The question is, what is this regret pointing at? And am I still alive enough to move in that direction? Because here's the profound, sometimes terrifying truth. For most people reading this or listening to this right now, the answer is yes. You are still alive enough. The parallel self has not expired. The door has not fully closed. Regret feels like a verdict, but it is actually a redirect. The version of you that quit the unfulfilling job and built something new, still possible. The version of you that got genuinely healthy, still possible. The version of you that had the hard conversation, repaired the relationship, pursued the creative dream, moved across the country, learned the skill, built the discipline, still possible. You're not too old. You're not too late. You're not too far gone. You're just too comfortable. I want to give you a tool, a simple, brutal, clarifying tool that will cut through every excuse and comfort and rationalization you've built around the life you're living. It's called the deathbed test, and it works like this. Imagine yourself at the end, not morbidly, practically. Imagine you're old, you're in your final hours, and you're looking back at your life. Not the highlights reel version you put on social media, the real version, the full, honest, unfiltered accounting of how you spent your days. Now ask, what do I wish I had done differently? Not what do I wish had happened to me differently, what do I wish I had chosen differently? because the things that sting on that deathbed are almost never the things you tried and failed. Failure is something the human spirit can make peace with because at least there was movement, at least there was attempt, at least there was a try. What people cannot make peace with, what haunts the deathbed, is the unlived, the unattempted, the comfortable choice made at the juncture where the uncomfortable, right and real choice was available. Now bring that clarity back here, back to today, back to this moment. What would future you, the one looking back, want present you to choose right now? Because present you still can. Present you has the extraordinary luxury that future you on that deathbed would give anything to have. Time, options, a pulse. Don't waste it on comfortable. The ghost of the unlived life doesn't have to haunt your ending. It can be your beginning. It can be the thing that finally, definitively pushes you out of the trap and into the terrain of your real life. Part 5 is about what happens in that terrain, about what discomfort actually builds, not just in theory, but in the practical molecular reality of who you become when you stop choosing easy.
Here's what nobody tells you about discomfort. Not the abstract, inspirational version, lean into the struggle and all that. The actual, neurological, physiological, psychological reality of what happens to a human being when they consistently choose the harder thing. They become different. Not metaphorically, literally, biologically. Their brain physically rewires. Their stress response calibrates differently. Their threshold for challenge expands. Their relationship to fear transforms from obstacle to signal. They become, for lack of a more scientific term, built different. And this isn't philosophy, this is neuroscience. Section neuroplasticity and the discomfort loop. Your brain is not static. It is not fixed at birth or at 20 or at 40. It is, as neuroscientists discovered in one of the most paradigm-shifting findings of the late 20th century, plastic, changeable, reshapeable at every age, in every direction, in response to what you consistently do and experience and expose yourself to. This is called neuroplasticity, and it is, in the context of this conversation, the most hopeful scientific discovery ever made about human potential. Because what it means is this. Every time you do something uncomfortable, your brain doesn't just endure it, it adapts to it. It builds new neural pathways. It reinforces the circuits that handle challenge, uncertainty, and difficulty. It literally grows the regions associated with emotional regulation, executive function, and resilience. In plain language, every time you choose discomfort, you become more capable of handling discomfort. And the inverse is equally true and equally important. Every time you choose comfort when discomfort was available, every time you take the easy path when the hard path was right, you reinforce the circuits of avoidance. You shrink the pathways of resilience. You train your brain to treat difficulty as intolerable. Comfort makes you smaller. Discomfort makes you larger. Not in some vague metaphorical sense, in the actual, measurable, structural architecture of your brain. Section the hormesis principle. There's a concept in biology called hormesis. It describes a phenomenon where exposure to low doses of a stressor, something that would be harmful in large doses, actually makes a biological system stronger. Exercise is the most obvious example. When you lift weights, you're literally tearing muscle tissue, causing damage. If you did enough damage, if you lifted until failure every day with no recovery, it would destroy you. But the right dose, the right stress applied at the right intervals, your body responds by rebuilding stronger than before. Because the body, like the brain, is an adaptive system. It doesn't just recover from stress, it overcompensates for it. This principle extends far beyond the gym. Cold exposure, fasting, public speaking, difficult conversations, financial risk, creative vulnerability, the discomfort of learning something new when you're accustomed to mastery.
All of these, applied at the right dose with the right recovery, don't just test you, they build you. The question is not whether discomfort is good for you. The question is whether you're applying it consistently enough and at high enough a dose to trigger adaptation, or whether you're living so far inside your comfort zone that your system has nothing to respond to, nothing to overcome, nothing to grow from. A muscle that is never stressed does not maintain, it atrophies. A human being that is never challenged does not plateau, they shrink. Section What Discomfort Actually Teaches. Beyond the neuroscience, beyond the biology, discomfort teaches something that no classroom, no book, no podcast, no mentor can give you. It teaches you what you're made of. Not in the abstract, believe in yourself sense, in the practical, empirical, data-driven sense. Every time you go through something hard, every time you face something that terrifies you and come out the other side, you collect evidence. Evidence about your own capacity, about your own resilience, about the gap between who you thought you were and who you actually are under pressure. And that evidence accumulates, it stacks, it builds what psychologists call self-efficacy. Not just self-confidence, which is feeling good about yourself, but the deep, earned, experiential belief that you are capable of handling hard things, that you have been tested and you have not broken. You cannot buy this. You cannot talk yourself into it. You cannot manifesto it into existence. You can only earn it by doing hard things and surviving them. Every comfortable person is operating on untested self-belief. They think they can handle hard things, but they don't know because they've never had to find out. And that uncertainty, that fundamental unknown at the center of their self-concept, is its own kind of prison. The person who has been through hard things and come out alive carries a completely different energy, a completely different foundation. They don't just believe in themselves, they know themselves. And that knowing is unshakable in a way that comfortable confidence never is. So how do you begin deliberately building this architecture? How do you start choosing discomfort when every biological instinct says choose easy? You start small, but you start today. The discomfort practice is not about massive, dramatic upheaval. It's not about quitting your job on Monday and moving across the country by Wednesday. It's about building the habit of choosing the slightly harder thing, consistently, daily, relentlessly, until your relationship with difficulty changes at a cellular level. It looks like this. The alarm goes off. You want to hit snooze. You don't. You get up. That's 1 rep. The conversation is awkward. You want to avoid it. You have it. That's 2 reps. The workout is brutal. You want to stop at 80%. You finish. That's 3 reps. The creative work is terrifying. You want to consume instead of create. You create. That's 4 reps. None of these individually will transform your life. All of them, compounded across days and weeks and months and years, will make you into someone who is unrecognizable to the comfortable version of yourself that started. Discomfort is a practice, not a one-time event, not a dramatic crisis that forces growth. A daily, deliberate, humble, unglamorous practice. The people you look at who seem built from a different material, the ones who handle pressure with grace, who build things that matter, who seem immune to the petty anxieties that consume most people, they weren't born that way. They just practiced discomfort longer than you have. The architecture of discomfort is not something that happens to you. It's something you build. One uncomfortable choice at a time, 1 rep of the harder thing at a time. Part 6 is going to talk about the people in your life, the ones who are keeping you comfortable when you need to be challenged, and the ones you need to find who will help you build something real.
We need to talk about the people in your life. And I want to do this carefully because this is where motivational content often becomes toxic, where cut off the negative people becomes a justification for abandoning everyone who doesn't unconditionally support every single decision you make. That's not what we're doing here. What we're doing is something more nuanced, more real, more honest.
We're going to look at the difference between people who love you and people who challenge you. And we're going to reckon with the uncomfortable truth that sometimes, not always, but sometimes, these are not the same people. The difference between support and challenge. Support says, I'm here for you no matter what. Challenge says, I love you too much to let you stay stuck. Both are forms of love, but in the context of the average trap, in the context of a life made dangerously comfortable, it's challenge that you need most and support that you'll instinctively seek. Because support feels good. Support validates. Support doesn't require you to confront anything or change anything or be uncomfortable. Support says you're enough exactly as you are. And while that is true at the level of your inherent worth as a human being, it is dangerous medicine for a person who is capable of more and choosing less. The people who genuinely transform, who escape the average trap, almost universally point to a person in their life who loved them enough to tell them the hard truth. A mentor who said, "You're playing small." A friend who said, "You know you're not actually happy, right?" A partner who said, "I see what you're capable of, and this isn't it." That person is a gift. That person is the alarm in the comfortable life. And most people, afraid of that discomfort, afraid of that confrontation, surround themselves with supporters and keep the challengers at arm's length. The comfortable enablers. Every person stuck in the average trap has at least one comfortable enabler in their life, sometimes several. A comfortable enabler is not a bad person. They are not a villain. They are, in fact, usually someone who loves you very much in a protective, well-meaning, keep-you-safe kind of way. But their love expresses itself as permission, permission to stay, permission to not try, permission to call good enough success, and fine happiness. They're the friend who says, "You don't need to do all that, you're already doing great," when you're clearly not doing great. They're the family member who says, "Why risk what you have?" every time you mention an idea, a change, a move, a reach. They're the partner who confuses their comfort with yours, who unconsciously resists your growth because your growth requires them to grow too, and they're not ready. None of these people are your enemy, but all of them are anchors, and an anchor, even a loving one, keeps you from moving. The mirror principle. Here's something profound that most people never consider. The people around you serve as mirrors. They reflect back to you what's possible, what's normal, what's acceptable, what constitutes a good life. If every mirror around you reflects a comfortable, average, getting by life, that becomes your baseline of reality. You literally cannot see beyond it, not because you lack vision, but because vision requires a reference point, and all of your reference points are pointing at okay. But when you spend time with people who are operating at a higher level, who have done harder things, who have built something real, who have been through the fire and come out shaped rather than destroyed, something happens. Your reference point shifts. Suddenly, what you thought was ambitious looks modest. What you thought was risk looks like a normal Tuesday. What you thought required exceptional talent looks like what happens when a regular person simply commits longer than average. The mirrors in your life are programming you. The question is, what are they programming you to believe is possible? Finding your challengers. Here's the practical move, the one that will actually change things. You don't need to abandon your comfortable circle. You need to expand your challenging one. Seek out people who are doing the thing you want to do, specifically people who were at your level not long ago and are now further along. Not celebrities, not distant legends, real, accessible humans who are one chapter ahead of you in the story you're trying to write. Why? Because the gap is small enough to feel real. The distance is crossable. You can look at them and think, not "I'll never be that," but "I can see the steps from here to there." Find them in communities, online and off, in the comment sections of people building things, at events you force yourself to attend even when you'd rather stay home, in the DMs of people doing work you respect, where a genuine question is more valuable than a hollow compliment. And when you find them, study them, not to copy, but to borrow their reference point, to let their normal recalibrate your ceiling. Because your ceiling is not determined by your talent, it's determined by what you believe is possible. And what you believe is possible is almost entirely determined by who you surround yourself with. And finally, the hardest conversation that almost nobody wants to have. Sometimes the person holding you most comfortably in the average trap is someone you love deeply, a parent, a partner, a best friend of 20 years, someone whose opinion you value above almost anyone else's. And they are not a bad person, but they are scared of what you becoming more fully yourself might mean for the dynamic you share, scared that you'll outgrow them, scared that your success will expose their own comfortable staying put. This is not their fault, but it is your responsibility to address. Not by leaving them, by growing toward them, by having the honest conversation, the one that says, I love you, and I need you to love me enough to let me become more, to not use our relationship as a reason to stay small, to grow with me, even if it's uncomfortable. Some people will rise to meet that request, some won't. Either way, you will have done the most loving thing possible, told the truth, given them the chance to choose it too. Your circle is either lifting you or anchoring you. There is rarely a neutral. Choose your mirrors carefully. Find your challengers deliberately. Have the hard conversations with love. And then turn your attention inward, to the habits and systems that will make your escape from the average trap not just an aspiration, but an inevitability. That's part 7.
Motivation will lie to you. I know, coming from a motivation video, that's a strange thing to say, but it's the most important thing I'll tell you in this entire series, so stay with me. Motivation is an emotion, and emotions, by their nature, are temporary. They ebb and flow with your sleep quality, your blood sugar, the weather, whether someone was rude to you this morning, whether you had a good week or a bad one. The problem with almost every motivational video, book, and seminar ever created is this. They give you a surge of feeling, a spike of, yes, I'm going to change everything. And then, 48 hours later, when that spike has faded and the alarm is going off and the couch is comfortable and the task is hard, the feeling is gone. And without the feeling, most people return to baseline, to the average trap. Because motivation gets you started, but motivation cannot keep you going. Only systems can do that. A system is not a plan. A plan tells you what to do. A system removes the need to decide whether to do it. The difference is everything. When something lives in the realm of decision, when every morning you have to choose whether to exercise, whether to work on the project, whether to practice the skill, you are pitting your highest intentions against your lowest energy moments. And your lowest energy moments will win more often than not, because that's when willpower is most depleted and comfort is most seductive. A system removes the decision. It makes the hard thing the default. It builds the path of least resistance in the direction of growth rather than the direction of comfort. Here's what that looks like concretely. The workout clothes laid out the night before, the journal on the pillow, the phone left in another room during the work block, the meeting with yourself, blocked in the calendar, treated with the same seriousness as a meeting with your most important client. The environment designed so that the right thing is easy and the wrong thing is hard. Systems are environmental architecture. They shape your behavior by shaping your context, and they work when motivation doesn't, because they don't require you to feel like doing the thing. They require you to simply not undo the setup. The compound effect of small systems. Here's where most people underestimate themselves and underestimate the power of the unglamorous. They're waiting for the dramatic action, the big pivot, the complete overhaul.
They want to change everything at once, and because changing everything at once is overwhelming, they change nothing. But here's the mathematical reality of small, consistent systems. 1% every single day for a year does not produce a 365% improvement. It produces a 3,778% improvement. That is not a motivational fabrication. That is actual compound mathematics. 1% every single day, compounded. The person who reads 10 pages a day will have read over 35 books in a year, while the person who binges nothing and reads nothing stays exactly where they are. The person who saves and invests even a small amount consistently will be in a completely different financial reality in 10 years than the person who spends everything and saves when they feel like it. The person who writes 1 paragraph a day will have a full book in less than a year, while the person waiting for the perfect chunk of time to write will have nothing. The systems are not exciting. The systems are not Instagram content. The systems are quietly, relentlessly, mercilessly building the version of you that will be unrecognizable to your current self without requiring a single dramatic moment. The keystone habit. Among all the systems you could build, all the habits and routines and structures, there is one type that carries disproportionate weight. Researchers call it the keystone habit. A keystone habit is one that, when established, automatically makes other positive behaviors easier. It creates a cascade. It's the domino that knocks over all the others. Different keystone habits work for different people, but the most reliably transformative ones tend to involve the morning. Why? Because the morning is a controlled environment, before the world has had a chance to impose its demands on you, before the inbox fills and the meetings start and the social obligations kick in. The morning is yours if you claim it, if you build a system around it. The person who wakes up early and moves their body, even for 20 minutes, tends to eat better that day, to be more focused, to make better decisions, to feel more in control of their choices. The person who starts their morning with intention, with a moment of clarity about what matters, about what they're building, about who they're becoming, tends to navigate the rest of the day from a place of direction rather than reaction. It's not magic, it's system design. It's the first domino. Find your keystone habit. Build your morning like it's the most important meeting of the day, because it is. It's the meeting with the version of yourself you're trying to become. And here's the final piece, the piece that transforms a system from something you do to something you are. When James Clear wrote about habit formation in Atomic Habits, the most profound insight was this: the most effective behavior change is identity-based, not outcome-based. The outcome thinker says, I want to run a marathon, and they train for the marathon. And if they hit a setback, the motivation wavers because the goal is distant and the difficulty is immediate. The identity thinker says, I am a runner, and runners run, not because of a goal, but because of who they are. Every run is not a step toward a goal, it's evidence of an identity. Every run makes the identity more true, more real, more unshakable. Build systems not around what you want to achieve, but around who you want to become. Ask not, what do I need to do? Ask, what would the person I'm becoming automatically do in this situation? And then do that, today. Not because you feel like it, not because motivation is high, but because that's what they do, and you're becoming them. The system saves you when the motivation fails, and the motivation will fail. Count on it, plan for it, build around it. Because on the day the motivation is gone, on the cold Tuesday morning in February when every cell in your body wants to stay in the comfortable, warm bed, the system will carry you, and you will arrive at the other side of that moment, not just having done the thing, but having proven to yourself that you're the kind of person who does the thing even when they don't feel like it. That proof is priceless. Part 8 is about what to do when the system gets hard, when the setbacks come, when the trap tries to pull you back in.
I want to tell you something that most motivational content refuses to acknowledge. You are going to go back. Not forever, not permanently, not in a way that defines you, but at some point in this journey, maybe multiple points, you are going to slip back into the comfortable. You're going to choose the easy thing when the hard thing was what you needed. You're going to have a week or a month where the systems collapse and the motivation evaporates, and you find yourself right back where you started, wondering what happened. And when that happens, if you're not prepared for it, you're going to do the most dangerous thing possible. You're going to use it as proof. Proof that you're not capable, that you don't have what it takes, that this was naive, that you should have stayed comfortable, that people like you don't break out of traps like this. And that story, that seductive, comfortable, self-protecting story, will pull you back in deeper than you were before. So we're going to talk about the relapse before it happens. We're going to give you a framework for it, so when it comes, you recognize it, you name it, and you use it rather than being used by it. The why setbacks are structurally inevitable. Growth is not linear. Everyone knows this abstractly. Nobody fully internalizes it until they're in the middle of a setback that feels like failure. The research on behavior change, on addiction recovery, on skill acquisition, on any kind of significant personal transformation is unanimous on this. Setbacks are not anomalies. They are part of the structure. They are not signs that the process isn't working. They are part of how the process works. Here's why. When you push against a deeply established pattern, a behavioral, neurological, identity-level pattern that has been in place for years, that pattern doesn't just quietly dissolve, it pushes back. The brain, which we've established is obsessed with homeostasis, fights the change. It creates powerful impulses toward the old behavior, precisely at the moments of highest stress, highest fatigue, highest emotional vulnerability. Not because you're weak, because you're human, because the old pattern was deeply grooved and the new pattern is still being carved. The setback is the groove fighting back. And the way you respond to the setback determines everything. It either deepens the old groove or deepens the new one. The 24-hour rule. Here is the most practical, immediately applicable tool I can give you for handling a setback. It's called the 24-hour rule. When you slip, when you choose comfort over growth, when you miss the workout, break the fast, skip the work session, make the old choice, you get 24 hours to feel it. Not to punish yourself, not to spiral, not to catastrophize, just to feel it, honestly acknowledge it, and understand what happened. After 24 hours, you close the case. Not because the setback doesn't matter, because the extended self-punishment is another form of the comfortable. It's another form of staying still. Wallowing in guilt and shame feels productive, feels like penance, but it produces nothing. It just gives you a reason to stay in the emotional collapse longer, which conveniently means not taking the next uncomfortable step. The 24-hour rule says acknowledge, analyze, return. Same day if possible, next day at the latest. Not I'll restart Monday, not I'll wait until the 1st of next month, not I've already blown it this week, might as well go all the way. Now, again, despite the slip, because of it, return. The relapse as data. Here's the reframe that changes everything about how you experience setbacks. A relapse is not a failure, it's data. Every time you slip back into the comfortable, every time the old pattern resurfaces, it's giving you information about something, about a trigger you haven't addressed, about a gap in your system, about a belief that's still running in the background, about a need that isn't being met in a healthy way. The question after a relapse is not what's wrong with me. The question is, what does this reveal? Slipped on the eating? What was the stress level that week? Was the sleep quality good? Was there a social situation that triggered the old pattern? Was the system too rigid to handle a disrupted schedule? Slipped on the work habits? Was the environment wrong? Was the goal unclear?
Was there a fear underneath the avoidance that hasn't been addressed? Every relapse contains a lesson about the specific shape of your resistance, and that lesson, if you're willing to look at it, is more valuable than 20 uninterrupted days of smooth progress. Because smooth progress doesn't teach you about your edges. Setbacks do. And finally, when the setback comes and the comfortable voice says, "See, this is who you really are," here's what you do. You return to the identity you've been building. Not perfectly, not fully formed yet, but the seeds of it, the evidence of it. I am someone who has shown up 14 days in a row. I am someone who is building something real. I am someone who has chosen the harder thing more times in the last 2 weeks than in the last 2 years. One slip does not overwrite that record. You are not your worst moment. You are the trajectory. And the trajectory, even with this setback factored in, is pointing somewhere new. Hold the identity. Return to the system. Don't let the relapse write the story. Setbacks are coming. Now you're ready for them. Not because you'll be immune, but because you'll be equipped. You'll know what to do. And knowing what to do is often the only difference between the person who escapes the trap and the person who's dragged back in. Part 9 is about the long game, about what this looks like not in weeks, but in years, about the version of yourself on the other side of sustained discomfort, about why it's worth everything.
Most people overestimate what they can do in a year and catastrophically underestimate what they can do in a decade. That sentence is the entire argument of Part 9. Because the average trap operates on a short time horizon, it seduces you with immediate comfort and hides the long-term cost. It makes the couch feel better than the gym because the gym's benefit is invisible today. It accumulates over years. The antidote to the average trap is not more motivation. It's not more urgency. It's not more hustle. It's a longer time horizon. It's the ability to make today's decisions from the perspective of the person you'll be in 10 years, to do the math on small, consistent effort compounded across a decade, to fall in love not with the immediate result, but with the process, with the identity you're building, brick by brick, through every uncomfortable choice. Let's run the math, not on money, on everything. The person who builds the habit of daily physical discipline at 25 is not just fit at 35. There's someone who knows in their bones that they can make themselves do hard things. They've spent 10 years proving it to themselves. Their confidence isn't borrowed, it's earned, and it transfers everywhere. Into their work, their relationships, their creative output, their ability to navigate crisis. The person who commits to learning a skill genuinely, deeply, consistently for 10 years becomes one of the top practitioners of that skill in the world, not by being exceptional, by showing up when others don't, by doing the reps, by choosing the discomfort of growth over the comfort of coasting. The person who builds financial discipline at 25, who invests consistently, spends consciously, builds systems and not just plans, is in a fundamentally different position at 35 than the person who spent those years comfortable and reactive with money. Not richer by a little, different by an order of magnitude. This is what the long game looks like. Not a dramatic transformation, a compounding one. Quiet, relentless, revolutionary. There's a different psychology required to play the long game, a different relationship with time, a different tolerance for the gap between effort and visible result. Most people abandon the right path because the results aren't appearing on a timeline their impatience can accept. They start eating well, 2 weeks pass, the scale hasn't moved the way they hoped, they quit. They start building the side project, 3 months pass, no traction yet, they quit. They start the discipline, 6 weeks in, still feels hard, they conclude they're not built for it. They quit. But the long game player has a different internal conversation. It sounds like this. I'm not looking for results. I'm looking for proof of process. I'm not measuring whether I've succeeded yet. I'm measuring whether I showed up today, whether the system is intact, whether the identity is deepening, whether I'm doing the thing that the person I'm becoming does. And they keep going, quietly, without the dramatic validation, without the external proof yet, just the internal knowing, I am building something. I cannot see it fully yet, but I am building it. And then, one day, and this is the part that surprises everyone even when they know it's coming, it appears. Not gradually, it appears suddenly. A threshold gets crossed, a tipping point gets reached, and everything that was invisible becomes visible. Everything that was developed becomes developed. Everything that was potential becomes actual. And the people on the outside say, wow, where did that come from? And the long game player smiles, because they know. It came from day 1, day 14, day 263. It came from every morning they showed up when the motivation wasn't there. Every choice they made for the person they were becoming instead of the person they used to be. It came from the long game. And the long game started the day they decided to stop choosing comfortable. Let's apply this to something beyond career and physical health. Let's apply it to the most important and underexamined area of compounding in most people's lives: relationships. The person who consistently chooses the uncomfortable truth over comfortable silence in their closest relationships is building something that most people never have: depth, real depth, the kind of depth that can only grow in the soil of honesty, of vulnerability, of the willingness to say the hard thing because the easy thing would slowly erode what's real. The person who avoids every difficult conversation, who keeps the peace at the cost of authenticity, is slowly, quietly draining the life from every relationship they have, not through malice, through comfort. And 10 years later, the comfortable relationship avoider looks back at what were once vibrant connections and sees only the polished surface of something hollow, safe, predictable, fine. While the person who chose the discomfort of truth is surrounded by the kind of relationships that sustain, that challenge, that grow, that last. The long game in love is the same as the long game in every other domain: consistent, uncomfortable, honest investment compounded across time into something extraordinary. And finally, the long game requires a different definition of success. Not the short-term definition, not the social media definition, not the metrics that measure where you are today against where other people are today. The long game definition of success is simple. Am I becoming the person I was designed to become? Am I moving, however slowly, however imperfectly, in the direction of my highest potential? Am I building something real or maintaining something comfortable? By that definition, success is available every day. On the hardest days, it looks like not giving up. On the easiest days, it looks like showing up anyway. On the setback days, it looks like returning. Success is not a destination on the long game, it's a direction. And if you're pointed in the right direction, if the discomfort you're choosing is moving you toward the truest, most fully realized version of yourself, then you are succeeding right now, today, even if no one can see it yet. Especially then. The long game is not glamorous. It will not trend. It will not go viral, but it will build you into something that no trend, no viral moment, no brief surge of motivation could ever produce. And part 10, the final chapter, is the call, not to motivation, to decision, to the moment that matters more than any video, any system, any inspiration, the moment you choose.
We've come a long way. 10 parts, 10 deep dives into the most dangerous trap that civilized human life has ever produced. 10 examinations of how comfort operates in your biology, your identity, your golden cage, your ghost of unlived potential, your architecture of growth, your social circle, your systems, your setbacks, your long game. We've been thorough. We've been honest. We've gone places that most content is afraid to go. And now we arrive at the moment that all of it was building toward. Not a technique, not a hack, not a new system or a reframe or a clever insight. A decision. Because here's the truth that has been underneath every single part of this series. You already know everything you need to know. You have always known, at some level, what you were meant to do and who you were meant to become. The average trap didn't succeed by keeping you ignorant. It succeeded by keeping you comfortable enough that the knowing didn't translate into action. Information was never your problem. Decision was. So this is the final part, and it's about what a real decision looks like. Not the fake decision, the one that feels like a decision but is actually just a feeling that fades. The real one, the one that changes the architecture of your life from this moment forward. A real decision is not a thought. A real decision is not a feeling. A real decision is not a journal entry or a vision board or conversations with a friend where you both get excited and then nothing changes. A real decision is an action, specifically an irreversible action. In 1519, when Spanish conquistador Hernán Cortés landed in Mexico, he did something that seemed insane at the time. He ordered his ships burned, his entire fleet, every vessel his people had used to cross the ocean, gone. Now, the history of what followed is complicated and bloody, and I'm not here to celebrate conquest, but the tactical brilliance of that single decision is undeniable. He removed the option of retreat. He made going forward the only path available. He turned a choice into a necessity. When the going got hard, and it got very hard, his men couldn't vote to go home because home was now separated by an uncrossable ocean. The decision was made. The alternative was gone. The only path was forward. This is what a real decision looks like. Not I'll try, not I'm going to make an effort, not this sounds right for me, but the burning of the ships, the irreversible act that makes going back harder than going forward. Now, you don't need to be reckless. You don't need to quit your job tomorrow with no plan and call it bravery. Burning ships, in the modern context, doesn't have to be financially catastrophic, but it has to be real. It has to be something that creates genuine accountability, something that makes the new path more real than the old one. It looks different for different people. For some, it's a public declaration, telling the people in your life about the commitment you're making, so that social accountability holds you when internal motivation doesn't. For others, it's a financial investment in the direction of the new, paying for the course, the coach, the equipment, the professional registration, because money spent in a direction makes retreat more costly. For others, it's the conversation, the one with the job, the partner, the family, that names the new direction out loud and makes it official. Whatever it is for you, it has to be real. It has to be something that when the comfortable voice says you can always go back, you can look at and say, no, I can't. I already moved. The last honest question. Before the final call, I want to ask you one last question, the most honest question of this entire series. In 10 years, when you look back at this exact moment right now, having just listened to all of this, having felt whatever you're feeling, what do you want to have done? Not in general, not in some abstract dream life sense. In response to this moment, what do you want to have done with this, with whatever's been stirred up, clarified, confronted in you over the course of these 10 parts? If you felt recognition, the "that's me" moment in part 1 when we talked about the anesthetic of comfort, what do you want to have done with that recognition? If you felt the ghost of the unlived life in part 4, what do you want to have done with that ache? If you felt the identity prison in part 2, what do you want to have done with that confrontation? Most people will feel these things. Most people will have genuine, powerful, real responses to the content they've consumed today. And most people will feel those responses fade over the next 72 hours as the comfort of routine reasserts itself, as the dopamine from consuming inspiring content evaporates and the unglamorous reality of actually changing something reasserts itself. And they will have done nothing, and the trap will tighten. Don't be most people. The 3 things you do today, not tomorrow, today, right now, after this. 3 things, only 3. 1. Write it down. Not on your phone's notes app, buried under grocery lists, on paper. The specific thing you've been choosing comfortable over. The specific version of yourself you've been avoiding becoming. The specific ship you've been keeping afloat as a backup plan. Write it down. Make it real. Make it legible. Make it something you can look at. 2. Take one action in the direction of it. One. Not the whole transformation. One step. Send the email, make the call, register for the thing, sign up for the accountability, have the conversation, buy the equipment, write the first paragraph. Whatever one action is available to you right now, do it. Because the first step is not about progress, it's about proof. Proof to yourself that you're the kind of person who translates decision into action on the day of the decision. 3. Tell someone, out loud, to a real human being, I'm doing this, I am becoming this, I am committed to this. Say it to someone who will hold you to it, ideally the most honest, challenging person in your circle. Make it witnessed, because a decision witnessed is a decision strengthened. The shame of going back on a public commitment is a small but real friction that has redirected more lives than any motivational speech ever has. That's it. Write it, do one thing, tell someone. Not next week, today. The final truth. Here is the last thing I will say. Comfort is not your enemy. Rest is not your enemy. Joy is not your enemy. Peace is not your enemy. The average trap is not a permanent condition of choosing comfort. It's the condition of choosing comfort as your ceiling, of letting comfort become the highest aspiration, of trading the full, rich, difficult, alive experience of your one human life for the dim, anesthetic, adequate, safe experience of a life that never fully happened. You were not built for that. Nobody is. You were built for the discomfort that grows you, for the challenge that shapes you, for the failure that teaches you, for the attempt that, whether it succeeds or not, makes you feel genuinely, vibrantly, undeniably alive. Not every day of that life will be exhilarating. Most of them will be unglamorous. Most of them will be the boring repetition of the systems, the habits, the showing up even when you don't feel like it. But underneath the unglamorous, there will be something that comfortable never provides. Meaning, direction, the deep, quiet, unshakable knowing that you are becoming who you were supposed to become, that you are not wasting the extraordinary gift of this one, unrepeatable, limited, and therefore precious life. That when the end comes, and it will come for all of us, you will not be visited by the ghost of the unlived life, because you will have lived it. You will have chosen the discomfort, every day, imperfectly, repeatedly, relentlessly. And that will have made all the difference.